Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Peter Pettigrew, a name that sparks mixed feelings. He was known as the loyal friend of James Potter, Sirius Black, and Remus Lupin, one of the creators of the Marauders map. But what drove this seemingly harmless, overlooked wizard to betray his closest friends and serve the Dark Lord? Today, let's dive into this dark, puzzling story. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Order of Merlin and the Lie. After the tragic events when Peter faked his own death, the Ministry of Magic found only his finger. That was enough to officially declare him a fallen hero. For his death in the line of duty, he was posthumously awarded the Order of Merlin First Class, the highest wizarding honor. His mother received the medal and probably lived the rest of her life proud of her son, never suspecting the truth. For context, the same honor was given to legends like Albus Dumbledore, Minerva McGonagall, and even Minister Cornelius Fudge. Later, in another war, Remus Lupin received it posthumously too, but for a real sacrifice. Pettigrew, meanwhile, managed to fool the entire wizarding world, painting himself as a martyr and victim. Number 2. The Marauders, and Peter, the weak link in the group. The Marauders were that famous Hogwarts foursome: James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. Movies often romanticize their friendship, making it look like Peter was a respected, equal member of the gang. But the books hint at something much more complicated. Peter was always the weakest link. His friends liked him, but often treated him with condescension, even pity. They teased him for his cowardice and clumsiness. One notorious example, Sirius suggesting Peter as the secret keeper for Lily and James. Sirius didn't see him as strong or reliable, quite the opposite. He thought no one would suspect such a pathetic traitor. That choice proved fatal. Number 3. The Long Road to Animagus. Why he became a rat. One of the Marauders' greatest achievements was mastering the incredibly advanced magic of becoming animagi. They didn't learn it for fun. They did it to support Lupin during his werewolf transformations. But not all of them managed equally well. Peter was the last to master it. James became a graceful, majestic stag, Sirius a powerful, clever dog. And Peter? He could only become a rat, small, unnoticed, cowardly. That form was deeply symbolic, foreshadowing his future betrayals. Number 4. Animagus abilities and strange communication with rats. Animagus magic is notoriously complex, and the books don't give us a detailed manual for how it really works. But there's an intriguing detail. An animagus in animal form can understand others of the same species. After fleeing Britain, hiding from justice as a rat, Peter spent over a decade in that shape. It was other rats who told him about a mysterious shadow in the forests of Albania. That's how he found the wasted, weakened Voldemort. Was this an innate animagus gift, or just the result of spending so long in animal form? We can only speculate. Number 5. Voldemort's Wand, the story of betrayal. After the Potters died, Voldemort left his wand in the ruins at Godric's Hollow. It was a twin to Harry's wand, a dangerous piece of evidence. Peter took it, fearing its magical trace might lead back to him. He hid it and spent years undercover as Scabbers, the Weasley family's pet rat. But when he was exposed and cornered, he ran straight back to his old master. Retrieving the wand from its hiding place, Peter travelled to Albania to restore Voldemort's power and ensure his own safety. Number 6. Distrust among Death Eaters, an outsider among his own. Even after returning to Voldemort, Pettigrew never truly belonged among the Death Eaters. Many of them despised him for betraying the Potters. Some Death Eaters, like Bellatrix Lestrange and Barty Crouch Jr., had stayed loyal even in Azkaban. Others, like Lucius Malfoy or Igor Karkaroff, managed to disavow Voldemort and build new lives, but Peter was always suspect. Many believed he deliberately led Voldemort into a trap at the Potters' home. They never saw him as loyal, only as cowardly and slippery. Number 7. Childhood, the mysteries of his origins. We know frustratingly little about Peter's early life. Even his parents' names are lost to history. His mother is simply Mrs. Pettigrew. We only know he was born in 1960 and started Hogwarts in 1971, just like the other Marauders. Most likely, his childhood was quiet and unremarkable. His tendency toward cowardice and insecurity may have been shaped by years of mockery and humiliation. Such experiences often shape character well, and in Peter's case they bred weakness, a desire to please the strong, and eventually treachery. Number 8. Peter's wand, a symbol of his nature. Peter. Pettigrew's wand was more than a tool, it was a mirror of his soul. In an interview, J.K. Rowling shared that his wand was chestnut wood with a dragon heartstring core. Chestnut wands, according to Ollivander, often choose owners drawn to duplicity or conflicted morals. For Peter, it was the perfect match. The wand never cared if its master was brave or good. It only cared that he would do whatever it took to survive. In Deathly Hallows, Ollivander described Dragon Heartstring as producing the most powerful magic, but also being quick to turn to another master. This was Peter's nature in every way. He served James Potter, then Voldemort, then pretended loyalty to the Weasleys. Like his wand, he could shift allegiance without blinking. The wood and the core joined to create a tool as unstable as the man who wielded it. When Peter used this wand to cast the dark mark in the sky or to bind Harry in the cellar, it was never just a piece of wood. It was a warning. Every flick of that chestnut wand whispered that loyalty meant nothing to Peter Pettigrew. That, in the end, was his truest magic. Betrayal dressed up as necessity. Number 9. Why Peter wasn't in Hufflepuff. Many readers wonder why Peter Pettigrew never ended up in Hufflepuff. He looked like he belonged there. Nervous, eager to please, always following. But the Sorting Hat saw something more hidden. In Philosopher's Stone, the hat told Harry, "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head." That same power of choice worked for Peter. Somewhere inside he had a spark of boldness, not the clean courage of James Potter or Sirius Black. A smaller, more desperate flame. Peter's bravery showed itself in strange ways. He dared to become an animagus, a process that terrified even talented students. He slipped into Voldemort's camp when every other Death Eater fled. He betrayed the Potters, a decision so dangerous it nearly killed him. These were not acts of a loyal Hufflepuff. They were the twisted bravery of someone willing to risk anything to avoid being alone. There is a thin line between courage and panic. Peter spent his life crossing it. He was brave enough to act, but too weak to stand by the right choice. In the end, the Hat's judgment was not wrong. Gryffindor does not promise virtue, only daring. And Peter Pettigrew was daring in all the worst ways. Number 10. Life with the Weasleys, years of constant fear. Peter Pettigrew spent 12 years inside a cage of his own making. As Scabbers, he curled in Ron Weasley's pocket, feeling every thud of a 12-year-old heart that had no idea it carried a murderer. Every morning, Molly Weasley would coo over him, scratching behind his ears. He pretended to twitch his whiskers like a normal rat, but inside he was always listening. He knew one careless move would expose him. The worst were Fred and George. They were too clever by half. More than once, they tried to hex Scabbers to see if he would turn blue or sprout extra tails. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron complained, "Fred reckons he's not a proper rat." Peter trembled every time Fred lifted his wand, smiling that wicked smile. If the twins had been a little more curious, they might have forced his transformation years before Sirius ever escaped Azkaban. At night, Peter lay in his little cage, surrounded by the soft sounds of the burrow. Ginny's laughter, Percy's pompous speeches, Arthur's stories about muggles, all the warmth he never deserved, but the fear never left him. He knew that if he was discovered, it would not be the Aurors who came for him. It would be Sirius Black, still raging with grief. That terror was the price he paid for survival. Number 11. The Secret of the Silver Hand. When Voldemort rose again in the graveyard, he looked at Peter Pettigrew with a cold smile. "You have been most useful," he said in Goblet of Fire, his voice soft as a blade. As a reward, he conjured the silver hand, a gleaming, deadly thing. Peter flexed the fingers in wonder. For a moment he believed it was a gift, but Voldemort never gave anything without a hidden price. The hand was beautiful. It was also a trap. In Malfoy Manor, the truth revealed itself. Peter held Harry Potter at one point, his breath ragged. For the first time in years he hesitated. Harry looked up at him and whispered, "You owe me. You saved my life once." Something flickered in Peter's watery eyes. A memory of the boy he had orphaned. He loosened his grip. Just enough to be human, just enough to seal his fate. The silver fingers closed around his own throat. No spell was spoken. The hand acted by its own cruel will. J.K. Rowling described it as fleshless and inexorable. Peter clawed at it, eyes wide with terror. He tried to plead, but no voice came. Voldemort had built the punishment into the reward. Any trace of pity or disobedience meant death. The hand was a constant reminder that he was owned. Even in that final struggle, no one helped him. Ron Weasley watched, horrified. Harry tried to intervene, but it was too late. The silver hand tightened, and Peter Pettigrew collapsed. He died not as a hero, not even as a true villain, but as a warning. Voldemort trusted no one, least of all a traitor who might dare to feel remorse. Number 13. Hidden Parallels, Peter and Severus Snape. Peter Pettigrew and Severus Snape seemed like opposites. Snape was cold, disciplined, and cruelly intelligent. Peter was trembling, eager to please, and never truly respected. But both men shared a terrible truth. They betrayed the people who trusted them. Peter revealed the secret of the Potter's hiding place to Voldemort. Snape delivered the prophecy that doomed them. "I have spied for you and lied for you, put myself in mortal danger for you," Snape snarled at Dumbledore in Half-Blood Prince, confessing the price of that single act of betrayal. They both lived double lives. Snape, the Death Eater turned spy, kept his loyalty hidden even from Voldemort. Peter played the loyal friend, then vanished as a rat among the Weasleys for years. The difference was in what they did with those lives. Snape chose to serve Dumbledore out of remorse, driven by his love for Lily Potter. Peter served Voldemort purely to save himself. He never sought redemption. He only wanted protection. That single difference turned one traitor into a hero and the other into a crawling coward. Their endings reveal the cost of choice. Snape died for his double loyalty, watching Voldemort's snake strike while Harry listened. In Deathly Hallows his last words were, "Look at me," pleading for Lily's eyes one final time. Peter died alone, strangled by his own silver hand, a magical punishment designed by Voldemort for disloyalty. There was no one to mourn him, no one to witness anything but the grim justice of a master who trusted no one. These two men remind readers that betrayal has many faces. Snape's was the bitter face of regret. Peter's was the pitiful face of fear. But only one of them fought to make amends. Only one proved that even the darkest choices can be redeemed, and only one died with a sliver of dignity left. Number 14. Why Peter found Voldemort. Before anyone else. Peter Pettigrew survived when many Death Eaters were captured or fled, but he did more than hide. He hunted for Voldemort. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore says grimly, "Wormtail rejoined his master and helped restore him to his body." It wasn't luck. Peter's animagus form, a small, filthy rat, was perfect for slipping unseen through borders, feeding on scraps and eavesdropping in taverns and forests. while others like Lucius Malfoy claimed they'd been imperious. To avoid Azkaban, Peter scuttled in the dirt, listening for rumours of a shadow in Albania. He wasn't brave, he was desperate. When Voldemort fell, his followers scattered. Bellatrix Lestrange went to Azkaban, proudly refusing any plea bargain. But Peter couldn't stand the idea of punishment or life without a master to protect him. He knew he was worthless alone. He traded dignity for safety. That pathetic need drove him to sniff out the Dark Lord's wraith in a frozen forest, while the Ministry thought he was dead, his finger a false tombstone. There's something unsettling about imagining Peter by a fire in some rotting inn, listening to old men mutter about a dark shape moving through Albanian woods. He wasn't like Karkaroff, who fled in terror, or Snape, who risked Dumbledore's wrath to stay in Hogwarts. He waited, eyes glinting, claws twitching, ready to crawl back to the feet of the one who had ruined him. He was the only Death Eater who went looking not to fight but to beg. When he found Voldemort, there was no heroic confrontation, no duel, just a pitiful reunion. "My lord, it is Wormtail, it is I who found you," he whimpered, offering himself like a dog. Voldemort didn't embrace him, he enslaved him. Peter accepted it because fear was stronger than pride. He knew none of the others would even try. That cowardly loyalty made him Voldemort's most useful follower and his most despised. Number 15. Relationship with Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy never bothered to hide his contempt for Peter Pettigrew. In Deathly Hallows, the Malfoy Manor scenes ooze with tension. Lucius paces with haunted eyes, stripped of power after Voldemort's return, and there is Wormtail scuttling like a servant, polishing wands and fetching drinks. Lucius watches him with curled lip and dead silence. When Voldemort commands, Lucius obeys without protest. But Peter? Lucius treats him as vermin. Draco stands nearby, wide-eyed, while his father hisses, "Do it, Wormtail!" as if even saying his name leaves a bitter taste. Peter knows he's an outcast. The Malfoys are proud purebloods with wealth and lineage stretching centuries. Peter has no such heritage, no name worth defending. He is a reminder that Voldemort's followers were not all cunning aristocrats. Some were cowards who clung to power like leeches. Rowling writes, Wormtail's watery eyes shifted nervously between the Death Eaters. Even among traitors and murderers, he found no acceptance. Lucius used his weakness as entertainment, humiliating him in front of other Death Eaters. But the hatred went deeper. Lucius blamed Peter for the Dark Lord's fall. Without Pettigrew's betrayal of the Potters, Voldemort would never have vanished. Lucius lost his influence, watched the Ministry turn on his family. Years later, forced to serve Voldemort openly in his own home, he had to watch Wormtail creeping through his halls. The sight was intolerable. To Lucius, Peter wasn't a comrade. He was the filth that had brought ruin to the Malfoy name. When Voldemort gave Peter the silver hand, it was both a reward and a leash. Lucius watched with cold eyes. He understood the message perfectly. Voldemort trusted no one, least of all Pettigrew. "Wormtail, you owe your life to me," the Dark Lord reminded him. The Malfoys listened. They knew they were prisoners in their own manor, and they knew Peter Pettigrew was the lowest of them all, the rat who had no loyalty except to fear. Number 16. The secret meaning of Scabbers. Peter Pettigrew chose the name Scabbers for his animagus disguise. It wasn't an accident. Scab is something dirty, something you pick at and want to get rid of. A small wound that never quite heals. He knew exactly what he was doing. He picked a name that warned everyone to look away. Living as Scabbers was his masterpiece of deception. No one wanted to examine him closely. Ron Weasley treated him like an old toy. Molly fussed over him, but only because he was Ron's pet. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron said, "He's useless, he barely moves." That was exactly what Peter wanted. The name told the world he was nothing, less than nothing, just a scab. It let him listen without being heard. see without being seen. He heard Percy's smug lectures. He watched Ginny playing with her dolls. He learned every corner of the burrow. Scabbers was always there, and no one noticed. Fred and George tried. They prodded him, hexed him, teased Ron for owning such a pathetic rat. "Get a real pet," George joked once. Peter trembled. He was terrified they'd expose him, but their cruelty was his shield. No one else would bother with something so unimpressive. It's hard to imagine the fear he felt every day. He slept in straw, chewed crumbs from Ron's pocket. The great betrayer of the Potters reduced to squeaking in terror when Crookshanks appeared. He chose that life because it was safe. Humiliating, yes, but safe. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Crookshanks knew. J.K. Rowling described the cat watching Scabbers with unblinking suspicion. Peter hated that. Crookshanks was proof he couldn't hide forever, the only one who treated Scabbers like something worth hunting. He even faked sickness to avoid attention. Ron said, "He's been looking awful lately." Peter played along, bald patches, weak squeaks. He became the image of disease. He became the scab. But a scab is also a defense. It covers the wound, protects it from infection. That was Peter's twisted genius. He made himself disgusting so no one would want to touch the truth. The name Scabbers was his confession. He knew he was foul. He accepted it. He weaponized it. In choosing that name, he said, "Don't look too closely. I'm not worth your time." When Sirius Black finally cornered him, all the lies fell away. "I let you sleep in my house," Sirius roared. Harry watched Scabbers writhing. The scab peeled back, and the wound beneath was ugly. Peter screamed. He squeaked. He offered excuses. "He who must not be named would have killed me." The ultimate rat. Not just a traitor, but a coward so small he became vermin. Even Voldemort understood what Peter was. He gave him the silver hand not as a reward, but as a threat. The Dark Lord saw Scabbers for what he was, something you use and discard. The name also mocked his old friendships. The Marauders had given each other noble animalgus forms: Padfoot, the loyal dog; Prongs, the proud stag; Moony, the tragic wolf; and then there was Wormtail, the rat. Even among friends, he chose the role of pest. Wormtail and Scabbers weren't so different. Both names crawled. Both suggested filth. He embraced them because he believed he deserved them. That's the tragedy of Peter Pettigrew. He wasn't seduced by power alone. He was crushed by self-hate. He believed being a scab was the best way to survive. He had a choice once. He could have been brave. He could have been loyal, but he thought small. He chose survival over honor. Scabbers is a warning to every wizard and muggle alike. When you stop believing you're worth saving, you'll do anything to keep breathing. And in the end, the scab killed the man. Peter died alone, strangled by the reward he'd begged for. The scab was picked away at last, leaving nothing but the rot he tried to hide. No one mourned Scabbers, no one missed Wormtail. That was the true curse of the name he chose. Number 17, Betrayal as a survival strategy. Peter Pettigrew has always been called a coward, but that word doesn't explain everything. He was more than afraid. He was calculating. From the moment he realized Voldemort was rising in power, he made a choice. He would not fight. He would not run. He would join the side most likely to win. When James Potter and Sirius Black laughed together, Peter laughed too. But inside he was taking notes. He measured their trust. He learned their habits. He watched the way James stroked his wand when he thought no one noticed. That was Peter's strength. Observation. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Remus Lupin said, "He was always there, always listening." Those words were not a figure of speech. Peter listened because he needed every scrap of advantage. He knew he was never the strongest, but he could be the most informed. Some would call it pathetic. Others might call it clever. Peter called it survival. He saw the world as a field of predators. You chose which predator would eat you last. When Voldemort demanded a spy inside the Order, Peter volunteered, not because he believed in the cause, but because he knew Voldemort would reward the first to bring real intelligence. He was right. The Dark Lord marked him as faithful. Even after Voldemort's fall, Peter didn't panic like the others. Lucius Malfoy lied to the Ministry. Bellatrix went to Azkaban screaming oaths of loyalty. Peter simply vanished, a rat slipping under the floorboards. It took brilliance to stay hidden for 12 years. No spells, no allies, just the mind of a man who knew he was prey. His animagus transformation wasn't only a trick, it was a philosophy. Be small, be forgettable, survive. When Sirius Black finally broke free, Peter didn't run to the auras. He didn't beg Dumbledore for mercy. He went straight back to Voldemort. Even weakened and bodiless, the Dark Lord was still the biggest predator in the forest. Peter understood that instinctively. Some might think he regretted his betrayal, but he never tried to undo it. He never sent an anonymous owl to warn Harry Potter. He never confessed to Dumbledore. His only regret was getting caught. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort said, "Wormtail here has been the most faithful servant." The truth was simpler. Peter was the most desperate. Desperation can look like loyalty if you squint hard enough. He didn't betray the Potters out of hate. He did it because he saw the end coming. He believed Voldemort would win. And Peter Pettigrew refused to be the last man standing on the losing side. Every choice he made was a calculation. When he cut off his own finger, it was not madness, it was strategy. Leave proof of your death, give the auras a story to believe, and slip away while everyone mourns. Sirius never forgave himself for trusting Peter, but even Sirius could not see the depth of Peter's cunning. He had spent too many years believing Peter was harmless. That was the camouflage. A coward runs, a survivor adapts. Peter adapted so completely that he became something less than human, a creature who would betray any friend if it meant living one more day. When the Silver Hand strangled him, it was not only punishment. It was proof that Voldemort had understood Peter better than anyone. He knew Peter would betray again if given the chance. The other Death Eaters despised him because he reminded them of their own weakness. No one likes to see what they might become if stripped of pride and conviction. Peter never pretended to be brave. That was his final honesty. He was exactly what the world made him, a scavenger, a parasite, a man who lived by clinging to the strongest master. In the end, it worked longer than anyone expected. 12 years as a rat, 4 years serving Voldemort again. Only one mistake killed him, one moment of pity. For all his cowardice, Peter Pettigrew survived longer than many who called themselves courageous. That perhaps was the truest tragedy. Number 18, the consequences of betrayal for the wizarding world. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure, it changed the entire wizarding world. When he told Voldemort the Potter's secret, he set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. That one whisper doomed Lily and James. It turned their home into a tomb. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius Black shouted, "You sold them to Voldemort!" That wasn't melodrama, it was the cold truth. Peter's act wasn't a small slip, it was the spark that lit the fire. Without it, there would have been no scar on Harry's forehead. Voldemort himself didn't expect what followed. He aimed to kill a child. Instead, he destroyed his own body. Pettigrew gave him the location, but he couldn't give him victory. That single betrayal fractured the Dark Lord's power. That night in Godric's Hollow created the boy who lived. Harry's legend was born because of Peter. Every whispered prophecy, every act of resistance, every candle lit in defiance of the Dark Mark, all of it rooted in that failed murder. For years, Voldemort's followers were hunted, Azkaban filled with his most loyal, Bellatrix Lestrange screaming oaths behind bars, Lucius Malfoy swearing innocence before the Wizengamot. The Ministry congratulated itself on victory, all thanks to a betrayal that ruined its master. Yet the world also paid a price. Orphans, widows, entire families torn apart. Alice and Frank Longbottom tortured into madness, and all of it began because one man couldn't bear to stand against Voldemort. Even Harry's childhood was shaped by that moment. The cupboard under the stairs, the bars on the window, Dudley's taunts. None of it would have existed if Pettigrew had kept the secret. Harry would have grown up loved. Dumbledore understood this. He saw the war's true shape. In Half-Blood Prince, he told Harry, "You are the chosen one precisely because Voldemort marked you as such." That marking only happened because Peter opened the door. Every death in the Second Wizarding War traced back to that night. Cedric Diggory fell in a graveyard designed by Pettigrew's planning. Alastor Moody died running from the Dark Lord's new power. Fred Weasley's laugh was silenced in the rubble of Hogwarts. Pettigrew didn't kill them all with his wand, but he made their deaths possible. He built the foundation for Voldemort's return. A servant who sold his friends for safety then enabled the rise of terror once more. Some call him pathetic, but his crime was monumental. He did what even Bellatrix failed to do. He delivered Voldemort the weapon he needed, a prophecy fulfilled by Harry's survival. He didn't care about prophecies or grand plans. He only wanted to live. That simple hunger twisted the fate of thousands. Every Order mission, every Aura patrol, every funeral, all part of Peter's legacy. When Voldemort returned, he needed someone to help him regain a body. Pettigrew provided the blood, the flesh, the ritual. Bone of the father unknowingly given, flesh of the servant willingly sacrificed. Leans spoken in Goblet of Fire still sting. Without Peter, there is no graveyard, rebirth. No Triwizard Trap, no screaming mother trying to reach her son through the veil. The Dark Lord needed his rat more than any general. Even Harry's final choice, to walk into the Forbidden Forest, to let himself die, was shaped by the prophecy that existed because Peter betrayed the Potters. Voldemort's fall, Harry's sacrifice, the Elder Wand's allegiance, all woven into the betrayal of one man. It's tempting to dismiss Pettigrew as weak, but weakness can be catastrophic. He proved that evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it squeaks, and in that tiny sound is the promise of disaster. He never planned to reshape the world, but he did. He was the match that lit the inferno, the rat that gnawed the foundation. When the war ended, statues were raised for heroes, names like Potter, Longbottom, Lupin. But there was no monument for Pettigrew, just the empty silence of a man no one wanted to remember. Yet he cannot be forgotten, because he is the reminder that sometimes the smallest betrayal destroys everything, and the world can burn because one man chose to live at any cost. Number 19. His role in Voldemort's resurrection. Peter Pettigrew was no mastermind, but when it came to Voldemort's resurrection, he was indispensable. He tracked down his fallen master in the damp Albanian forest. He coaxed that tattered spirit into a snake-like mockery of life. He carried Voldemort in a cradle of magic and fear. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort hissed, "Wormtail here has been most helpful." It wasn't praise born of loyalty. It was recognition of a tool used well. Peter didn't flinch. He accepted it. He planned the graveyard. He found the Riddle House, the old bones of Tom's father. He dug them up without blinking. Bone of the father, unknowingly given. Peter arranged every step. He had no love for Voldemort. He had no choice. He prepared the cauldron. He gathered Nagini's venom. He captured Bertha Jorkins for information. He disposed of her when she was spent. These weren't the acts of a noble servant. They were the work of a man who refused to be left behind. When Harry was kidnapped from the Triwizard Maze, Peter dragged him struggling to the graveyard. Harry shouted, cursed him. Peter ignored it. He knew he had to deliver the boy or die for failure. He sliced Harry's arm, collected blood in a vial. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. Harry's screams meant nothing. Peter's own heart pounded in fear. Voldemort was watching every move. But the darkest moment came next. Peter turned the silver knife on himself. He held his own shaking wrist over the cauldron. The blade bit deep. Flesh of the servant willingly given. Blood gushed. He didn't scream right away. He looked into Voldemort's red eyes, begging for approval. Only then did he let out a howl of agony as his hand fell away, smoking in the cauldron's heat. This wasn't loyalty, it was terror. Peter knew what happened to servants who failed. He'd seen Voldemort torture men for misspeaking. Losing a hand was a cheap price for continued survival. When Voldemort rose, the graveyard turned cold. Peter collapsed, clutching the stump of his wrist. Voldemort looked down and said, "Your loyalty will be rewarded." He meant it like a joke. Peter shivered. He whimpered, but he smiled too. He would live another day. Even mutilated, he was useful. Voldemort conjured the silver hand in front of the gathered Death Eaters. It was perfect, strong, deadly. Voldemort whispered, "May your loyalty never waver again." Everyone heard the threat. Peter flexed the fingers. He felt the cold power. He thanked Voldemort over and over. It was pathetic, but he meant it. He knew he had just sold the last piece of himself. He didn't care. He couldn't afford to care. Years later, that same hand would kill him, the ultimate punishment for mercy, Voldemort's final joke. But in the graveyard, Peter felt triumphant. He had proved his worth. He had done what no one else dared. Bellatrix was in Azkaban. Lucius had grown cautious. Even Snape held secrets, but Peter had given blood, bone, flesh. No one could doubt he would do anything to stay alive. That was his true magic. Not loyalty, not courage, but perfect, ugly, desperate survival. Number 20. Why Dumbledore underestimated him. Albus Dumbledore was famous for seeing into people's souls. He saw goodness in Severus Snape. He saw bravery in Neville Longbottom, but he missed the danger in Peter Pettigrew. Peter was never the loudest marauder. James Potter was the leader. Sirius Black was the rebel. Remus Lupin was the thinker. Peter was the one who laughed too hard at their jokes. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Dumbledore admitted, "Sirius told me the function of the Fidelius charm was kept secret from me." Even Dumbledore trusted their plan. He didn't question who the secret keeper was, because Peter was small, forgettable, the perfect spy. No one watched the rat in the corner. No one imagined the least among them could destroy them all. Peter played the role well. He acted terrified of Voldemort. He let James ruffle his hair and call him Wormtail. He wore loyalty like a costume. Even the Order of the Phoenix didn't suspect him. They fought Death Eaters, tracked giants, and negotiated with werewolves. They didn't watch Peter Pettigrew. Dumbledore planned for big threats, the Elder Wand, Horcruxes, prophecies. He didn't plan for a friend with a shaking voice and sweating palms. In Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore said, "Dark times lie ahead of us, and there will be a time when we must choose between what is easy and what is right." Peter always chose what was easy, but easy choices can be deadly. He didn't hurl curses, he whispered secrets. He didn't duel James Potter. He opened the door so Voldemort could walk in. Dumbledore trusted in love and friendship. He believed those bonds were unbreakable. He didn't see that Peter loved safety more than any friend. Harry once asked Dumbledore why Voldemort survived. Dumbledore explained Horcruxes. He talked of soul-splitting evil, but he never spoke of the quiet betrayal that made Voldemort's plan work. Because in Dumbledore's mind, the real threat was always the Dark Lord himself, the prophecy, the wand, the curse. He forgot that Voldemort needed help to find the Potters, that he needed someone ordinary enough to go unnoticed. Peter was that man, the enemy no one thought to question, the danger no one prepared for. When Sirius confronted Peter in the Shrieking Shack, he shouted, "You should have died rather than betray your friends." Dumbledore might have agreed, but he hadn't imagined Peter wouldn't. Even in the end, Dumbledore offered Peter mercy. In Half-Blood Prince, he let Slughorn toast absent friends. He remembered James and Lily. He never mentioned the one who sold them. Peter's story was a blind spot for even the greatest wizard, a lesson that evil doesn't always wear black robes and hiss Parseltongue. Sometimes it wears a nervous smile and nods along. Dumbledore was wise enough to see the best in people, but Peter Pettigrew was the price of seeing only the best. He was the proof that sometimes the smallest traitor can shatter the biggest hope. Number 21, Friendship with Remus Lupin. Remus Lupin always saw Peter Pettigrew differently. While James and Sirius teased him, Remus tried to be kind. He knew what it was to be on the outside. He understood loneliness better than anyone. At Hogwarts, Remus carried his own secret. He was a werewolf. He watched his friends become animagi just to help him. Peter was part of that plan. Even though he struggled the most, he finished it. Remus never forgot that effort. When James joked about Peter's clumsiness, Remus would shake his head. He would say, "Leave him alone." In his eyes, Peter was one of them, a marauder, a brother. But Peter saw something else. He saw that kindness as weakness. He learned to smile back at Remus while planning how to use him. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when the truth came out in the Shrieking Shack, Lupin's voice cracked. "I trusted you," he said. The betrayal was more than strategy. It was personal. Remus had believed Peter was dead for 12 years. He had mourned him alongside James and Lily. All the while, Peter had been sleeping in Ron's bed, listening to stories of Harry's parents. When Lupin and Sirius finally cornered him, there was no triumph. There was grief. Lupin didn't want to kill Peter. Even then, he hoped for an explanation. But Peter only begged. He fell to his knees. He clutched at Lupin's robes.
"Remus, you wouldn't kill me, would you?" It was a plea, but also a manipulation. Remus's hand trembled. He remembered the boy who had once laughed with them under the Whomping Willow. He remembered late nights with the map spread out between them. But Harry stopped them. "I don't think my dad would have wanted his best friends to become killers." That mercy spared Peter's life. It was the same mercy Remus would have shown him on his own. Even later, when the world accepted that Sirius was innocent, Remus struggled to say Peter's name without choking. He had believed in him. That was the wound that never healed. During the Second War, Remus fought with the Order. He faced Death Eaters in the dark, but he never faced Peter again. It's unclear if he would have been able to strike the killing blow. Remus was a man who forgave easily. He understood brokenness, but even he could not excuse what Peter had done. Peter's betrayal hurt everyone. But it hurt Remus most because he had loved Peter without reservation. The tragedy was that Peter knew this. He had used it. He had accepted every kindness and then traded it for safety. When Lupin died at the Battle of Hogwarts, he fell fighting for the same ideals he had tried to teach Peter: loyalty, sacrifice, family. Peter died alone, strangled by his own silver hand. There was no friend left to weep for him. Their paths were a study in contrast. One man chose to save others despite the cost. The other chose to save himself no matter who he destroyed.
In the end, Lupin's legacy was love. Peter's was betrayal. And that betrayal was all the more cruel because it broke the heart of the one person who had always tried to see the good in him. Number 22. Hidden role in Harry's fate. Harry Potter's entire life was shaped by Peter Pettigrew long before they met. Peter was the secret keeper who sold out James and Lily. Without that betrayal, Voldemort would never have found Godric's Hollow. That night defined Harry forever. Harry's scar was the first gift Peter gave him, a mark of survival, a curse, and a promise. Every time it burned, Harry remembered his parents' screams, remembered Voldemort's laugh. All of it was rooted in one man's whispered secret. But Peter didn't just destroy Harry's family. He created the legend. The boy who lived. The child who defeated Voldemort. Without Peter, there was no prophecy fulfilled. No rallying point for the wizarding world. In Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore tells Harry, It was love that saved you. But that love was tested because of Peter's fear. Without that betrayal, Harry might have grown up with his parents. No cupboard under the stairs. No cruel words from Vernon Dursley. Peter set the course that forced Harry to choose between hatred and mercy. He forced Harry to grow up too soon, to learn the difference between vengeance and justice. Years later, in Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry faced the man who made him an orphan. He saw Peter cowering on the floor of the shrieking shack, begging for his life. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin wanted to kill him. They had every right. Harry felt the anger burn, but he said, "I don't reckon my dad would have wanted them to become killers." That was the moment Harry chose mercy over revenge. He didn't do it for Peter. He did it for himself, to stay like his parents. Peter's life was spared that night, not because he deserved it, but because Harry refused to become the thing he hated. That choice defined Harry more than any battle. But Peter repaid that mercy by returning to Voldemort. He found the broken shadow in Albania. He nursed the Dark Lord back to strength. He gave his own hand to the cauldron that restored Voldemort's body. That second betrayal set fire to the world all over again. It brought the graveyard duel, Cedric Diggory's death, the Triwizard Tournament twisted into a trap. Harry carried those scars too. The knowledge that mercy can be dangerous, that even the best choices can have the worst consequences. Yet even in that darkness, Peter taught Harry something vital, that people aren't just heroes and villains, that cowardice can be as deadly as hate. When they met for the last time in the cellar of Malfoy Manor, Peter hesitated. He remembered Harry's mercy. His silver hand closed around his own throat. Harry watched him die, not with triumph, but with grim understanding. Mercy hadn't saved Peter's soul. It had only delayed his judgment. But that lesson stayed with Harry. He learned that choices matter, that mercy is only mercy if it costs you something. Peter's existence forced Harry to confront betrayal, to forgive without forgetting, to fight without becoming a killer. In the end, Peter Pettigrew shaped the hero just as much as Voldemort did. He was the shadow that taught Harry where the light was. Number 23, why fans hate him. Peter Pettigrew is not hated the way Voldemort is hated. Voldemort is easy to despise. He is openly cruel. He murders without remorse. He tells the world he wants to rule it with blood and fear. Fans hate him, but they also see him as a monster apart. Bellatrix Lestrange is worse in some ways. She laughs as she tortures. She murders for pleasure. When she screams, "I killed Sirius Black," there is no regret. Her evil is unrepentant, theatrical, grotesque. Dolores Umbridge terrifies in her own way. She smiles sweetly as she carves words into a child's skin. She believes in the system so much she will abuse it for her own power. Her villainy is chilling because it wears pink cardigans. But Peter Pettigrew is different. Fans hate him for smaller, uglier reasons. He is not grand. He is not charismatic. He does not have twisted ideals or bold ambitions. He is pathetic. Peter did not betray the Potters because he believed Voldemort was right. He did it because he was scared. He did it to save his own skin. That kind of betrayal feels closer to home. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius spits at him. "You should have died rather than betray your friends." It is not anger alone. It is disgust. The idea that anyone could sell their friends to the murderer of babies just to avoid pain. Peter's defense is worse. He whines, he pleads, he says, what was there to be gained by refusing him? He doesn't even see why people are horrified. That's why readers hate him. He has no ideology to blame, no madness to explain away. He chose evil with his eyes open because it was easier than dying. Even Snape, who betrayed people too, did it for love. Twisted, obsessive love, but still a motive with weight. Snape carried guilt for years. He risked his life to fix what he broke. Peter carried no guilt. He hid in a child's pocket. He let a family love him. He listened to Molly Weasley sing while he plotted Voldemort's return. He let Sirius rot in Azkaban for 12 years, a man he had once called brother. He framed him, then pretended to be dead. When Sirius finally got to him, Peter screamed and cried for mercy he had never shown. Fans see that and recoil because he is too real. He is the cringing co-worker who would blame you to save himself, the neighbor who would sell you out if it meant safety. Voldemort is inhuman. Peter is all too human. That is what makes him terrifying. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort praises him for loyalty, but everyone knows it is a lie. Even Voldemort knows. He gifts Peter a silver hand designed to kill him at the first sign of pity. There is something particularly foul about someone who crawls to every master, who never fights for anything except his own safety. When he dies, strangled by that silver hand, it is not satisfying in the way Bellatrix's death is. It feels pathetic. A man who destroyed so much, dying not in battle, but in whimpers. J.K. Rowling made Peter so loathsome because he is familiar. He is the worst possibility in all of us. The fear that we too could choose betrayal if the price were our lives. That is why fans hate him most of all, because he reminds them of something they don't want to see in the mirror. Number 24. Relationship with Crookshanks. From the moment Crookshanks laid amber eyes on Scabbers, Peter Pettigrew felt hunted. It was a humiliation he could never explain. He had survived auras. He had survived Voldemort's rage. Now he was cornered by a ginger cat with a squashed face. Crookshanks was no ordinary pet. Hermione had chosen him in the magical menagerie. The shopkeeper warned her he's quite intelligent. That was an understatement. Crookshanks was clever enough to see through Peter's disguise before any human did. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron grumbled, "That cat's got it in for Scabbers." He thought it was jealousy. He never suspected that Crookshanks recognized something unnatural in the rat's scent. Crookshanks never stopped stalking him. Every time Peter scurried across the Gryffindor common room, he felt the weight of those golden eyes, watching, judging, waiting. At night, Crookshanks prowled the dormitory. His paws were silent on the stone floor. His whiskers twitched. Peter would curl into a tight ball, praying the cat would grow bored. But Crookshanks never did. When Sirius Black broke into the castle, he found an unexpected ally. Crookshanks met the great black dog under the beech tree. He was not afraid. He seemed to understand that Padfoot was not an enemy. Sirius later told Harry, "Your friend's cat was the only creature who knew what I was." But Crookshanks knew more than that. He knew what Scabbers was. Crookshanks began stealing passwords from Neville. He carried scraps of parchment to Sirius. He guided Sirius to the Gryffindor Tower, all so they could catch the rat no one else suspected. Peter could sense the danger closing in. In the boys' dormitory, he began losing fur. He grew thin and jittery. Ron worried he was sick, but it was terror that gnawed him hollow. When Crookshanks cornered him on the windowsill, Peter nearly transformed back into a man. His small heart hammered so hard he thought it would burst, but he stayed a rat. It was the only way to keep the secret hidden. Hermione scolded Crookshanks. "Leave him alone!" She believed her pet was simply being cruel. But Crookshanks was the only one who saw the predator beneath the whiskers. The final chase began when Ron tried to keep Scabbers safe in his pocket. Crookshanks lunged, claws outstretched. Peter's shriek was almost human. He broke free and ran into the shadows of the Whomping Willow. There, Crookshanks pressed a paw to the knot on the tree's trunk. The branches stilled. It was a silent invitation to Sirius, to finish what he had begun 12 years earlier. Peter knew then that the game was over. A cat had undone all his careful hiding. In the shrieking shack, when Sirius and Remus revealed the truth, Crookshanks sat calmly at the door, as if he had always known how this would end. Ron protested he's just a rat, but Crookshanks looked at Peter with ancient contempt, a gaze that said, "I knew you were no rat at all. Some readers laugh at Crookshanks's persistence. They think it was only comic relief, but it was the most serious threat Peter ever faced in Hogwarts. He could fool Dumbledore, he could fool the Ministry, but he could not fool a creature born to hunt and to see what others miss. Crookshanks was the last obstacle between Peter and his escape. If not for Harry's mercy, he would never have left that shack alive. Even years later, Peter sometimes dreamed of golden eyes glowing in the dark. He had faced Dark Lords and survived, but a ginger cat nearly ended him. It was proof that sometimes justice doesn't wear robes or carry a wand. Sometimes it has fur and silent paws and a patient heart that will not be deceived. Number 25. How Peter saw Harry. Peter Pettigrew never spoke of what he thought when he looked at Harry Potter, but his eyes always betrayed something he couldn't hide, a flicker of recognition, a memory he wished he could erase. When Harry arrived at Hogwarts, Peter had already been living as Scabbers for years. He saw the boy in the Great Hall, wearing James Potter's messy hair and Lily's bright eyes. For a moment, Peter must have wondered if ghosts could be born in flesh. He kept to the shadows. He pressed himself into Ron's pocket. He told himself that Harry was just another child, that he felt nothing, but he was lying. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when the truth was finally revealed, Peter turned to Harry with a trembling plea. "Harry, James wouldn't have wanted me killed. He would have shown me mercy." It was the most human thing he ever said. But it was also cowardice dressed as regret. He tried to use Harry's memory of his father as a shield, as if the boy might pity him, as if pity could wash away betrayal. Later, in Malfoy Manor, Peter faced Harry again. This time, the boy was tied up, helpless. Voldemort's snake waited in the shadows, the silver hand pulsed with deadly magic. Harry looked up and said, "You owe me, Wormtail." His voice was quiet. He wasn't begging, he was reminding. In that moment, something shifted behind Peter's watery eyes. He remembered the shrieking shack. He remembered the way Harry had stopped Sirius and Remus from killing him. For a heartbeat, Peter looked at Harry not as an enemy, but as a child who had shown him more mercy than he deserved, a child who carried the faces of his oldest friends. But mercy could not save him from himself. His hand twitched, his wand trembled. He could not decide between fear and gratitude. J.K. Rowling described the moment with brutal simplicity. The silver fingers tightened. No curse spoken. No command given. Just the price of a lifetime spent betraying anyone who showed him kindness. Perhaps Peter saw James in that final moment. Perhaps he remembered a time when he was still part of something good, when the Potters and the Marauders were his family. But if he felt regret, it was too late. His courage had always been the thinnest part of him. It tore under the weight of Voldemort's magic. Even Harry seemed to understand. He didn't scream, he didn't curse Peter as he died. He just watched with pity, because he knew Peter was already hollow, a man whose fear had eaten everything human inside him. In the end, Peter never truly hated Harry, but he never loved him either. He saw in him a reminder of the life he threw away. That was the tragedy, that Peter Pettigrew could stand face to face with the son of his dearest friends and feel nothing stronger than terror. Number 26. Why the Hat didn't put him in Slytherin. People often wonder why the Sorting Hat placed Peter Pettigrew in Gryffindor. He seems like such a perfect Slytherin, cunning, self-serving, always choosing the winning side. But the Hat did not see ambition in him. It saw something smaller, something sadder. Slytherin House values cunning, yes, but also hunger for power, the drive to rule, the will to do whatever it takes to achieve greatness. Peter had none of that. He didn't want to lead. He wanted to follow. He wasn't Lucius Malfoy plotting influence in the Ministry. He wasn't Bellatrix Lestrange worshipping a dark ideal. He was a boy who trembled in the back of the classroom, waiting for someone stronger to protect him. The Hat placed him in Gryffindor because it saw the faintest flicker of bravery. Not the shining courage of James Potter, not the reckless daring of Sirius Black, but something softer. He had the nerve to want to belong, to chase the friendship of stronger, brighter people, to follow them into the Forbidden Forest or onto the Marauders' map. In Philosopher's Stone, the hat told Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are." Peter chose Gryffindor. Or rather, he clung to the hope that being in Gryffindor would make him better. He wanted to be brave. He wanted to be seen as one of them, James's friend, Sirius's equal, Remus's companion. But wanting to be brave isn't the same as being brave. Over the years, that tiny spark of courage didn't grow. It twisted. Instead of fighting, Peter learned to hide. Instead of standing up, he learned to kneel. Instead of loyalty, he chose safety. The hat doesn't see the future, it sees potential. In Peter, it glimpsed a boy who might find bravery in friendship. But he never did. When Voldemort rose, Peter didn't resist. He saw which way the wind blew. He switched sides. He justified it by saying, "He would have killed me." He used the memory of Gryffindor like a shield, even in betrayal, telling himself he had no choice. But the truth was he always had a choice. He just never picked the harder one. His sorting remains one of the most bitter ironies in the story. Gryffindor is the house of heroes, the house that produced Harry Potter, Neville Longbottom, but it also produced Peter Pettigrew. He proved that the line between bravery and fear is thin, that even the worst coward can wear the red and gold. Dumbledore understood this. He never said Gryffindors were perfect. He said they had nerve. Peter had just enough nerve to betray everyone who loved him. Perhaps the hat hoped Peter would change, that James and Sirius would inspire him, that Remus's kindness would guide him. But the hat can only sort. It can't save. In the end, Peter's courage was spent entirely on surviving, and that tiny spark that placed him in Gryffindor flickered out long before the silver hand choked the last breath from him. Number 27, Peter's death, karma in action. Peter Pettigrew did not die in a blaze of glory. He did not fall defending a cause or fighting a duel. He died alone in a cellar, strangled by his own hand. It was the perfect end for a man who had spent his life running from every choice that required real courage. The silver hand was Voldemort's gift. In Goblet of Fire, the Dark Lord had looked down at him with that cold smile and said, "May your loyalty never waver again." Peter had bowed, clutching the shining fingers as though they proved he was worth something. But Voldemort did not give gifts without poison hidden inside. The hand was enchanted to obey Peter's commands, but also to punish him if he ever faltered. Voldemort knew exactly who he was dealing with. Years later, in Malfoy Manor, Peter had the chance to prove that he could be more than a coward. Harry Potter lay captive, bound and helpless. Voldemort's victory seemed inevitable. Yet when Peter raised his wand to kill Harry, he hesitated, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for memory to weaken his resolve. Harry looked up and spoke quietly. "You owe me, Wormtail. I saved your life." That sentence landed like a stone in Peter's chest. He remembered the shrieking shack, the boy standing between him and the Marauders demanding mercy. He had never understood that kind of courage. He had only taken advantage of it. But some tiny ember of conscience flickered again. Perhaps he thought he could spare Harry and still live. Perhaps he believed there was time to change. His hand disagreed. The silver fingers closed around his throat without a word. They did not care that Peter's eyes had gone wide with regret. They did not care that his breath came in ragged gasps. J.K. Rowling wrote, "It was as though the hand were acting of its own accord, but it was only fulfilling its purpose, to ensure Peter never betrayed Voldemort a second time." Harry watched, horrified, as Peter's own gift became his executioner. There was no spell strong enough to stop it, no plea that would move it to mercy. For all the lives Peter had destroyed, James, Lily, Sirius, no one lifted a wand to save him. Even Ron, who had carried Scabbers in his pocket for years, did nothing. This was karma, the reckoning he had evaded for too long, a coward's death, fitting for a coward's life. Peter sank to the floor. The silver hand loosened only when there was no breath left to steal. In that moment, he was not a marauder. He was not even a Death Eater. He was simply a man who had spent every day trying to avoid consequences and failed. The irony was brutal. His final act was the closest he ever came to decency. But even that sliver of humanity was too much for Voldemort's magic to tolerate. His body remained in the shadows, ignored by the Death Eaters who soon returned to the Manor. No one mourned him. No one spoke his name. Because in the end, Peter Pettigrew proved the truth Dumbledore had always taught, that cowardice can destroy a soul more thoroughly than any curse. His death was not tragic. It was inevitable. The last chapter in a story written by his own fear.